What's spiritual about murdering animals?
What's spiritual about murdering animals? Okay, so I went on a bit of a spiritual awakening, and on that spiritual awakening, the ancestors and the spirits came to me, said that I need to change my diet. If you look at some of these vegan products and stuff, they're actually worse for the body, this vegan stuff.
What food?
Like soya. It estrogenizes the men.
You should
They
see
got
how much
less
soy I drink
testosterone.
every day. I wish I had big titties, man.
Yeah, I got big titties. You can speak to animals. It's not some vast, mad thing that this actually exists. Plant right in front of us and speak to us.
How do you think they birth a child?
Having sex. You get me? They get jiggy. There's people that speak to dead spirits, which is something I do as I'm a medium. But then that's extremism.
No,
that's
not.
extremism, and that's
Okay,
that's not morally right.
The animal says you can take my life.
Because they're going to die anyway.
You're going to die anyway. Is it okay for someone to chop your head off?
If that's the case,
No animal is saying take my milk.
They are.
Your name again?
Rishi. What's
Rishi.
your name?
I'm Jack.
Jack. Nice to meet you, Jack.
Nice to sit down and talk with you. So you came up to us. We were walking here. You
Yeah.
spotted a vegan muscle t-shirt.
Yes.
I thought you knew them.
No, first time I met him, but there's quite a few Instagrammers that do vegan muscle, so I was like, he must be a vegan bodybuilder.
Yes.
So
then we asked you, are you vegan?
and yeah, I'm half. So I'm vegetarian. I've been vegetarian for 10 years now, straight.
Yep.
And I've had a lot of long periods of vegan. I veer to vegan products as much as I can.
Sure.
But occasionally I do have eggs, which is always organic eggs. I won't go for anything that's not free range, barn eggs, anything like that. And I also occasionally have a tiny bit of dairy, but I steer clear as much as I can.
Sure. And what turned you vegetarian in the first place?
So what it was the ethics for me, the ethics and morals around it. And I grew up in a Hindu background, and most Hindus are vegetarian.
Sure.
And I went on a bit of a spiritual awakening. And on that spiritual awakening, the ancestors and the spirits came to me and said that I need to change my diet, which meant it was a more high vibrational diet.
Sure. So a big part of that was saving animals?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Specifically from the meat industry?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you haven't consumed any animal flesh in that 10
No.
years? Right.
Nothing at all. Not even fish.
Not even fish? So the only animal products is eggs? You specifically said organic eggs?
Yeah.
And a little bit of dairy?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, I have to just ask you first of all then, do you know what happens even in the organic egg industry and the dairy industry? Do you know like the standard practices?
Yes, I do. So the poor cows, you know what they do? Like the poor cows, they take the baby calves away, then they put these machines in and and they take all their milk, and then all of that milk has low vibrational frequency because it's coming from trauma. So the trauma of the cow is then being transferred through the milk, and then we're consuming that through the dairy industry. And what they do, this milk, like it's got pus in it, it's got mucus, it's not cleansed properly.
Sure.
And actually in Hare Krishna's, I went to Hare Krishna temple recently, and they have dairy fresh from the cow, straight from the cow, from a cow that's been looked after, nurtured, well fed. They've still got their calves, and they have the milk from that, and that is meant to be, from the research that I've done, ahimsa milk.
Sure.
And some of the highest frequency stuff we can have in our body, but our body isn't used to it.
Yeah. So before we move on to ahimsa farm, so that's a good conversation, we will get on that.
Yeah.
Do you know what happens to the dairy cows inside the dairy industry? So you mentioned the forcible impregnation, the forcible taking of the milk.
Yeah.
Do you know what happens to, say, the male calves because they don't produce any milk?
They kill them and put them in the meat industry.
They do. What about the mother cows when they don't produce enough milk?
Same, they kill them.
Thing,
yeah.
So it's no different to the meat industry.
No.
Ahimsa farm? Okay. So now we're talking about the situation where, let's say, no cows are killed. Okay.
Yeah.
And they're looked after as much as practically possible. But fundamentally, we're still taking milk away from somebody. Replace that with a human. Replace them with humans. Look after them, you treat them well, but at the end of the day, you're still taking milk away from them, which is destined solely for their child. What do you think about that?
So from the research that I've done, the ahimsa milk, the philosophy behind it is, in our system of society, they kill a cow, and they say, like, there's a saying, give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach him how to fish, and he'll eat for life. And that's the saying. I'm not agreeing with the whole fish thing, you know what I mean? But the milk because the cow is taken care of and looked after, and if you look at these third world countries where the cows are and how they are treated, they're treated with love, care. They take care of the calves, the whole farming. They really nurture it. And the cow, we in Hinduism, they worship the cow as Gai Ma. Gai Ma is like the mother Gai, and she gives you abundance. So by looking after that, she feeds you with so much abundance with the milk. Because the milk,
Do you think the milk belongs to her though?
The milk.
Do you think it's for her and her child?
Her and her child, but she has abundance of milk. It's not like she has a limited amount for the calf. The calf will have its milk, and then it will be all right. But there's still so much reserve left, and that's not taking away from the calf.
Replace that with a human.
Yeah.
The human mother feeds their child plenty of milk, and there's a little bit left over. Does that still give you a right to go take it? They're not consenting to it. Because a dairy cow isn't consenting to it, even in a hens farm. But just because you give them love.
But how do you know they're not consenting? Because
how do you know they're consenting? That's
because these people are coming from a spiritual philosophy. These are coming from an energetic frequency place. So when there's people out there. I'm a practicing psychic medium. I work in many different ways, work with spirits, and you can speak to animals. It's not some vast, mad thing that this actually exists. So our human consciousness, by consenting, by connecting to the consciousness of the cow, and the cow can speak back to them, and it's beyond our comprehension. I mean, I'm quite blessed because of this journey that's allowed me to open up to this gift. But this gift exists in you. You have the gift of consciousness, and this consciousness means you can speak to cows, you can speak to animals, you can see they'll speak to you and say they're not treated well, or they've got a pain in their leg, or this is stuff that is beyond our human comprehension.
So do you think we can have a loving relationship with cows without taking their milk?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But we can also have a loving relationship with a cow, and that cow can consent to giving their milk.
How do they consent? I know what you just said there, but how are they consenting? What are they saying to you?
They would be saying, I've not experienced it with a cow. I experienced it with dogs and cats and different animals, horses. There's people called horse whisperers that speak to horses. That's how they consent. You actually speak to the consciousness. You speak to the, like you say, you know these things are living beings. Every living being has a consciousness. Every living being can speak to you. This plant right in front of us can speak to us.
Sure. Okay.
So connecting to that.
What do you think the cow's saying? What do you think they're saying? It's okay to take my milk.
So the philosophy behind it, going back thousands and thousands of years in the Vedas, these people were highly conscious beings, and they were on a whole different level of spiritual consciousness. And using that is how they found this philosophy, which is where the vegetarianism came from. And a lot of them, they have other things. You know, some of them, they don't even eat onions and garlic because it comes from the ground and it's a living sentient thing that's grown.
I will say that I don't know if I fully believe the idea that this cow is saying in a non-verbal way that you can have my milk, because first of all I do believe that this milk is solely for their child. The second question then is, how do you think they're impregnated?
How do you think they're
impregnated?
So
they produce enough milk, because they only produce milk when they're impregnated, right? And they have a child.
They're natural cows.
Sorry?
They're natural cows. On these farms, ahimsa farms and stuff, they're natural cows.
What do you mean by that?
As in, they're just cows, like...
What do you mean, sorry? How do you think they produce milk?
How do they produce milk? Well, the mother cow has udders, and the udders are produced for the child. So when they birth the child, and the udders...
How do you think they birth a child?
Having sex? You get me? They get jiggy.
So they're not actually having, even on these ahimsa farms, they're not having sex with other cows. How do you think they're impregnated?
I don't know. You tell me.
So, yeah, whether we're talking the dairy industry, ahimsa farm, they have to be impregnated by a human so that they produce milk. And it has to be year after year, so they're continuously producing milk, just like a human.
Okay.
Right? So what I would say, and you can tell me what you think, is that I think it's morally wrong to forcibly impregnate someone just so you can take their milk.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree totally with that.
So knowing you don't have to have milk, you can choose the vegan options. Like going to the store, you can choose the soy milk, you can choose the oat milk, the almond milk.
But they're really bad for the system and society anyway. For instance, soy is, all the soybeans were bought up by Monsanto years ago. So all the soya that we have, and I'm guilty, I eat a lot of soya products.
Soybeans are ancient. The Chinese culture.
Yeah, but a lot of them, if you look at the research and do the research on them, a lot of the seeds were then taken over by Monsanto. So nearly 96% of the soya that we consume is genetically modified.
I will also say then.
So do you agree with genetically modified food?
I don't really have a stance on GMOs.
Do you feel it's morally right?
I don't have a stance because the science isn't showing that it has any ill effects. But I'm not really interested in that.
If you were a
I will
human
say
and you were
though,
genetically
I will say I'm
modified,
not so much interested in that because at the end of the day, you don't even have to have soy milk, right? You don't
yeah,
have to.
but all of these things, the almonds, you know how much almonds it takes to create one bottle of milk? Like how
it
much?
takes far less resources than it does for dairy. I
It
think
takes-
we can all
it takes
agree
a
that.
lot.
If you don't want to consume almond
No,
milk,
but it
that's
takes
up
a
to
lot.
you.
Yeah,
Sure.
but all of the milks.
But we're talking about animal rights here.
Yeah,
Whether
I know.
Environmentally speaking, we can go into that. Right?
Yeah,
we
of
can
course.
decide whether it's worth it or not for the environment. But from the animal's perspective,
Yeah.
taking something away from them, what belongs to them, they had to be impregnated, etc., etc. And if we're talking about the mainstream dairy industry, which is 100% essentially, hens of farms is such a minority. Even though I disagree with the idea of impregnating a cow and
Yeah.
taking their milk when it's just destined for their child, right? Knowing you don't have to drink dairy, you said would you be willing to just choose the vegan option when possible if
Yeah.
you were to drink any type of milk?
Yeah, of course. But
Okay.
there's also a downside to that. So like I say, with the environmental and what they do and how much is consumed for that little bit is also really bad as well. So
Would you say that any food that we eat has some type of environmental impact?
yes,
Right.
Every food that we have
And the
has,
science is showing that if you were to drink any type of milk, and that's including milk alternatives like soy, almond, oat, they have the least environmental impact. It's much more preferable in terms of land use, water use, resource use, to choose the vegan option over the dairy option.
but then also science. There's this study on angstrom levels. So if you look at angstrom levels on lifefarm.com, I think it is, and you just Google it, angstroms, it teaches you about the energy and the consciousness frequency of the food that we're consuming. So some of the low vibrational stuff like coffee, alcohol, some of the margarines, they have zero energy, nothing, dead for our body. Our body can't, as much as it's environmentally friendly and society said, oh, butter's not good because of the dairy, it has no sustenance for our body.
Okay.
But yet, the other stuff that you look at, dairy, is that fresh dairy from a cow is actually one of the highest angstroms that our body can have. It's one of the highest energy frequencies. Now, who came up with that? Where did that come from? Was it from a consciousness level? Because science can teach us one thing,
So you
but
advocating
spirituality.
drinking dairy,
I'm
considering what they do to cows.
considering what I'm not advocating that you drink. I'm advocating you drink dairy from a live consciousness cow from ahimsa. I'm not agreeing with the way they're
So you're
impregnated.
agreeing, even in an ahimsa farm where they have to be impregnated,
Without the impregnated,
but they have to be impregnated.
if they wasn't,
Right.
if they wasn't, you're on a
Let's put that
farm.
aside then.
Say you're on a farm and there's dairy fresh from a cow that's not been impregnated. It's a natural, like Mother Nature wanted.
Okay.
That's
So then
perfectly
even
viable.
Then, but even then, you're taking something away from that cow that belongs solely to them because you wouldn't do it to a human. I'm going to assume that you wouldn't go to a human mother, even if they.
But if you ask them,
you would be willing to do that.
why not?
Okay, fair enough. If they consent, but this is
Yeah,
where it
exactly.
Comes,
So
this is-
consent-
no, but this
consent
is, where we
is
come
what I'm
full
talking about.
circle, because I don't believe a cow is non-verbally telling somebody they consent.
And this is the difference because you haven't experienced that level of consciousness with an animal yet, but it's possible in you. And I can solely tell you, if you do your science, your research, if you go through meditation, if you connect directly to this consciousness and this animal will speak to you. There's thousands of people. You look on YouTube, look on Google. There's horse whisperers, the people that speak to dogs, cats. There's people that speak to dead spirits, which is something I do as I'm a medium. How can I explain that to you?
Okay.
Does that make sense? But you have to experience. It comes from your experience.
Sure. All right, we'll leave that there. We'll leave that
'Cause it's
there.
really
Then
important.
I'll also ask you then.
Because it's really important.
How often are you drinking from an ahimsa farm? Drinking milk from an ahimsa farm?
Very rarely.
Very rarely.
Very rarely.
Because
I've only
if you
experienced
do-
it once.
Yeah, if you do drink, because that's a very, very small minority that isn't going to sustain the world. If,
It can.
No, but we don't have to drink dairy, right? We don't have to be, because then if we did it on a world scale, do you think it would even be efficient enough and effective enough to just rely on natural mating? Because how often are they going to be impregnated naturally? It's not every single year.
But if you looked at the what's
You put it on a
happened.
scale. What happens if you put it on a large scale? You get industrial farming.
Yeah, but a
And
lot of
that's
these
where we're at
cows.
right now, and
Yeah,
that's
but these
what you
industrial
agreed.
farms are why these animals and cows and calves and everything. There's such a minority of natural cows. Whereas if you go back in the day, there was cows everywhere roaming in this country, especially in England. That free-range livestock was quite common. It's just now the corporations, these Tesco's and these things have come and taken them all and made them industrial.
Okay.
But before, if that wasn't done and we were living by the law of the land, the law of Mother Nature, which is taught, that would be a different consciousness. If these animals, if people understood that animals have a consciousness and frequency and we're one with these animals, we wouldn't eat them. Why would I eat that animal when that animal is me? That's a part of me. It has a conscious, it has a frequency, it can talk to me.
So we can agree that you're never...
Quite passionate about
no,
this.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. So we are going to agree that I'm going to assume now that you would never buy dairy from a market.
No.
Never. When was the last time you did that?
Dairy from
You
a
can be
market.
honest, because I'm not going to judge or anything.
No. The max I've had is like a little splash of milk or some cheese. Max. I wouldn't go. I've not bought a actual milk for
But even
like
if
years.
it was a splash, do you think that justifies what happens to those animals?
No, of course not. And I take full responsibility of it. Sometimes there's been situations like there's a coffee and I had a splash of milk rather than a black coffee. Of course, I could choose a black coffee.
And would you choose a plant-based milk?
Yeah, always. Every time, 100%.
Okay. Every time, okay.
Yeah, every time.
No.
The max I've had is like a little splash of milk or some cheese. I take full responsibility of it. Sometimes there's a coffee and I had a splash of milk rather than a black coffee.
Every time, okay. Let's move on to eggs then.
Yeah.
Do you know what happens in the egg industry?
Yeah, I'm very, very aware of how the egg industry works. But I've also...
Can you tell me?
So the egg industry, they get these chickens, they again breed them specifically for eggs, and they're just taking eggs from them, they put them in a barn, caged, and there's barn eggs, there's live, free range, and free range. They say they're free, but they're
industry lies.
Industry, yeah. And then you got the organic ones, which we were going to get onto.
Tell me about organic.
So organic is a free range chicken. Free range, and free range. They say they're free, but they're
industry lies.
Industry, yeah. And then you get on its farm, roaming around, and it will lay an egg, and then that egg is then taken and put aside because it's just a free range organic egg.
Okay. And do you know what happens to the male chicks? Because obviously these hens are going to be having chicks, right? What happens to the male chicks because they don't produce eggs?
On an organic farm or organic?
Any egg farm.
On the.
What do you think happens to the male chicks because they don't produce eggs?
They put them in chicken. They kill them and that's where we get chicken from.
They macerate them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So because they don't produce, they're not meat chicks. They're not going to be of size to produce enough meat. They're considered a waste product, right?
Yeah.
So they macerate them, and that happens on any farm, whether it's free range, organic. It's all RSPCA approved. It's the standard practice. So whether you're buying from organic or not, it's standard practice for that to happen, right?
Yeah.
And fundamentally, even on an organic farm, when those hens, because they produce so many eggs, at a fraction of their life, they're going to stop producing enough eggs. They're going to be seen as a bit of a burden to the industry. They're not going to be profitable enough.
Yeah.
What do you think happens to them?
They're killed.
They're killed.
Yeah.
So knowing that it's no different to the meat industry,
no.
Would you still, knowing that you don't have to have eggs, from this point on, would you choose to not consume eggs?
It's a choice. I don't have it all the time, but I listen to my body. So again, it's the consciousness of my body. What does my body need? What nutrients is that egg giving me? The egg carries a lot of amino acids is it amino? Yeah, it's amino.
Yeah,
and the yolk. Yeah, and the yolk, and it's very good for protein. And the egg is unfertilized. So it's an organic egg is from an unfertilized, because the fertilization.
It's like a period.
Yeah, it's like a period, basically.
Well, it is a period, yeah.
Yeah, it is a period, yeah.
Knowing you can get proteins elsewhere, knowing what happens in those industries, and knowing that, because you just said it's a choice, knowing that the choice has been taken away from these animals because they're forced into these industries.
Yeah.
What happens to the male chicks? What happens to the hens?
I don't agree with any of that, especially the barn, live free range. But have you ever tried an organic egg off a farm that's just a natural roam chicken? Like I've been
knowing that I don't have to and I can get nutrients elsewhere and not have to harm these beings, I would choose not to.
But you see the energy levels of it. The yolk is so much brighter yellow compared to a barn egg. It looks like not even orange, like red. The yolk.
It doesn't matter what color it is, right? Because fundamentally, what happens to those chicks, I would say, is unjustifiable, and what happens to those hens is unjustifiable. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, of course. In the industry, but in a live farm, an organic farm, like there's many of them, especially if you go down south, down to Devon and that side of Cornwall. There's a lot of nature there. They have organic eggs. Chickens just roaming,
but
free, happy.
Again, organic, free range, free roaming. What I just said happens to them is standard practice. It has to happen because it's not profitable enough for these farmers to keep these male chicks, these hens, just living throughout their entire life. They have to do that to them.
Yeah.
So no matter where they are, if they get a belly rub every single day,
Yeah.
Doesn't matter because that's what happens to them. And you
Okay.
said you're against animal.
Yeah,
I
of
assume
course,
you're against
of
animal
course I
abuse
am.
and murder. Yeah,
of course,
so-
but I have been to places where the chicken is just naturally left to die and they don't eat it after or anything like that. It's just the chicken's just living its life and they love and nurture it as if it's a dog or a cat.
I can't see how that would be happening to every single hen on that farm, every male chick, because they can't, because they produce so many, because they have to produce so many eggs. It's just not profitable enough. So what you're talking about is they're very hypothetical. It's very
No. I've been to places. Like I say, there was a place I went to, Splat Hayes, and I was doing a retreat there. And at the retreat, free-range hens, they were looked after, loved, and they lived off the land. They were like
let's go with
pets.
that. Let's go with
They
that.
were pets.
Let's
They were
go.
literally like...
Let's say they are like looked after. They're not murdered. They're not sent to
Yeah.
a slaughterhouse, right? Let's say that.
Would you-
Again, knowing that the amount of energy, because Mel and Steve here, they're activists. They actually have rescued hens from the egg industry.
Yeah.
It takes so much energy for them. It's actually because naturally,
Yeah.
in the wild, these natural hens.
So what do you do with
Wild
the
hens,
egg?
they don't produce this
So-
many eggs. They produce like maybe 12 a
So
year.
what do you lot do with the egg? What did they do
feed
with
them
the
back,
egg?
because the amount of energy and nutrients it takes out of their body, I'd love
They
to show,
feed their period back.
because they want to eat them.
They want to eat their own period.
Yes.
So what if a human would
Because
do
of
that?
the amount of nutrients, it's up to the human. Now, what I'm saying is that because it takes so much nutrients and energies from these hens, it's actually better to feed it back to them for us, rather than us to eat them.
How is it fed back to them?
They throw it on the floor and they go crazy for it because they need it. They are exhausted after producing eggs. If you ever see, after a long period of time, of these hens in these industries, whether it's organic
No,
or not,
I'd like to look at that
Yeah,
up and
I'd
see
love
how
to
much
show you.
nutrients that egg is giving back to that chicken.
Lots.
Because that's also quite strange that it's
Now,
eating its
I'll
own
show you,
period.
it is wild when you see it, because when I first saw it, I was like, wow. It
Yeah.
says
It's quite
so much,
interesting,
because
wow.
what happens is they have the egg,
Yeah.
and they go crazy. They're following around. What are they doing with my eggs? They throw them on the floor, and they just go for it, and they just consume it so quickly,
Yeah.
because their body really needs it. It's just not natural for these hens to be in these situations where their body is producing so much, because we've artificially selected these hens
Yeah.
over many generations now, to the point that they're producing way more than their body can handle, and that's why they die naturally at a fraction of what their natural lifespan would have been.
Yeah.
It's just not right for their bodies.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So knowing that, again, man, you can get your nutrients elsewhere. Why would we not just choose the option that doesn't involve all of that?
Of course.
Yeah.
But then the law of the land is that, like, if we look at some of these vegan products and stuff, they're actually worse for the body. The stuff that I eat a lot of these
Sorry,
vegan
what
stuff.
food?
Like soya.
It's what makes you think that?
Because
It's
Because
it's
estrogen.
being consumed.
yeah, but
anciently.
it's actually it
Phytoestrogen.
estrogenizes a man.
Phytoestrogen. It doesn't affect humans.
It does.
No, it affects plants, not humans.
It affects. There's been studies done that humans are also affected by it. So men get a lot of their testosterone.
You should
they
see
get
how
less
much soy I drink
testosterone.
every day. I wish I had big titties, man.
Yeah, I got big titties.
Yeah,
Look
man,
at these,
it
baby.
doesn't. It's
You
an
know?
industry
Look.
lie, bro. It's an industry lie. They want you to think that. They want you to think that the soy is bad for humans. It's phytoestrogen. It's not actual hormone estrogen.
But then look at this. Look at the research done, and you look. Okay, Bill Gates. Bill Gates is one of the activists of veganism, and we know Bill Gates is one of the ones that was all behind the COVID lies and the injections and stuff
Sure,
like that.
sure.
So you have to
Alright.
you have to make more questions.
Well,
and see
okay.
What
Put
what
all
the,
of this
what
aside.
the what
You
the
don't
rabbit hole
have
is
to
teaching
consume
you.
soy. If you don't want to consume
No, of course
soy, you don't
not. Of
have
course
to.
not. But we have to look at the sustainability of these vegan products and what they're actually doing to the environment. How harmful are they actually?
The evidence, whether you believe this or not, man, I look at the evidence.
Yeah.
The most sustainable foods that we can choose, and the food that has the least harm on other beings, is vegan food.
Fresh
Now,
fruit and veg. Fresh
vegan
fruit
food
and
is
veg.
a very broad statement.
Yeah.
Fresh fruit and veg.
Yes.
Absolutely. Let's
Yes.
go
Yeah,
with
let's
that.
go with that, yeah.
And you can survive on those foods. Would
Yeah,
you
yeah,
agree?
100%.
What's stopping you from just choosing those options?
I
then?
do. Most
But
of the time.
fully, knowing what happens to these animals, what's stopping you from just today saying, I'm going to be vegan? Doesn't take anything away from you. But by choosing not to be vegan, it takes everything away from them.
Yeah,
Their
okay.
life.
Yeah, but I've had things. Okay, I was strict vegan, and I was vegan police, full on, no thing, plant-based, everything. And I went to a restaurant, ordered my friend a burger and chips. Same for them, burger and chips, vegan. And they came out, and it's rather than put like a bit of vegan cheese on it via life, they put a bit of cow's cheese. So I'm like, you know what? I'm vegan police. Nah. Then my spirits, the ancestors came and said, are you really going to waste that food, knowing what's happening on the planet? There's billions of people on the planet going without their natural, like their food needs met. So am I going to throw that food in the bin and be ungrateful just because it had a tiny bit of cheese on it? Or am I going to consume that and say, you know what, grateful, I know that it's not been good for the animal, but I'm not going to go waste this food and make them go to a good restaurant, go make me some more food. Because again, then I'm buying into the whole waste system, you know?
Say to that,
like, what would you do in that situation?
I'll tell you. If you consider what that animal had to go through to produce that dairy, let's say if it was flesh, dairy, eggs, if that was put on your plate by accident, if you consider what those animals had to go through to produce that,
Yeah.
how much they were violated for them to produce that.
Yeah.
Anybody, if it was a human, if a human was violated and something of a human was put on your plate, you would stand up and say, this is fucked up. They need to take this back. This restaurant shouldn't even be serving this in the first place. And if anything, you would give it a burial. You'd give it a funeral.
What? The burgers?
Yes. Because they are the body parts of murdered victims.
But then that's extremism.
No, it's
that's
not.
extremism, and that's
Okay,
that's not morally right. That's not.
If there was a human body part on your plate,
Yeah.
would you say it's extreme to say that this deserves a funeral? This deserves a burial?
If it was a human body
Or would
part,
you put it in your belly?
it depends on the situation.
Situation.
If I had
Really?
if I had nothing to eat, yeah,
No,
I'm
but we're not
blessed in
talking
the-
about that. We're not
Okay.
talking about survival situations.
So-
You go to a restaurant, they happen to put a human on your plate.
But human's different to a bit of cheese.
Why?
Why? Because
So if a human mother was violated, enslaved,
Yeah.
raped, and then they had their milk stolen from them, had their babies killed, like I said, all the stuff that happens to the dairy cows, would you say that that is wrong and I shouldn't even be putting that in my belly? If anything, I should get up and speak up about
is
this
a
and why
human
it's wrong?
conscious? Is a human conscious?
Yes, why?
So that human, the reason why we don't eat humans is because a human is conscious, right?
Animals are conscious too.
Exactly. So if an animal is
what's the
conscious, and if
difference?
an animal can say to you, you can have that milk.
So why is it extreme?
And if a little bit of cheese, is on a burger, my moral and ethics is saying I'm not going to go waste that and become a part of the waste consumption of this planet with everything else that's going on with that. We just.
So you're more
So you're
concerned about
you're
waste
bothered
than the
about
rights.
so you're bothered about eco-friendly.
So
you're saying to me that veganism is eco-friendly, yeah? So-
it can be eco-friendly.
So why would you then throw away these burgers away and then add to the ecological problem on this planet?
To put that back, are you more concerned about whether something is wasted rather than the entire life and rights of an animal?
I'm putting things in perspective for you to understand that
Yes or
actually
no?
the little bit of that cheese on that burger or throwing it away and adding to that is like a moral situation, isn't it? Which is the better of the evils? Do I say no, the animal, that little bit of cheese was wrong? Or am I going to be grateful and say, okay, you know what? Or I'm just going to throw away all that food and tell them, go and make another one because you put a tiny bit of cheese on it. It
At
makes
this point, right, okay.
You know,
I'll go with you here. So,
and this,
because I'll
is,
just
this
say,
is what changed my philosophy around veganism, because I was a vegan, strict, a vegan police I ended up being, like everywhere, veganism, you should be vegan, and then when I started to listen to my body, what my body wanted, I won't consume the flesh of animals, no fish, no nothing, but my consciousness and what my body needs is these things, and I always go with the knowledge. So the organic egg, the knowledge behind that, and looking at, okay, this energy, if you look at the energy of a barn egg, it's dead, it's horrible, I know the science behind it, but an organic fresh
it's
egg,
no different, as I said before.
yeah, so
it's no different.
the consciousness,
I'll ask you the question.
I go with consciousness.
Okay, I'll ask you a question then to put it in a different perspective.
Yeah.
Let's say that you were in the animal's position and you were, say, whether it's any of those industries, the dairy, the egg, or the meat, and you were raped, you had it stolen from you, your children were murdered, and you were going to be murdered.
Yeah.
And then your products, whether it was, say, a human's milk, their flesh, was put on someone's plate, would you want them to just be complacent in the abuse that you suffered and your exploitation and just consume it and move on with your day? Or do you want them to stand up and speak up about the exploitation you were faced with?
You can speak up about the exploitation, 100%. But then the moral dynamic
And would
is,
you want someone to be fully vegan or just sometimes vegan?
it depends on them. It depends what their body needs.
you-
It depends on their body. I know
knowing you can be-
people that have been vegan for like 5 years of their life, full on vegan police, and then going on more of a conscious and spiritual journey, and then listening to the body and realizing actually there's things that they need from other products.
What's spiritual about murdering animals?
What's spiritual about murdering animals? Okay, so
Do you
in
think
the
it's
jungle,
okay?
the law of the jungle, in the jungle, the consciousness, if you go to like the Amazon jungle, for instance, or you go to Africa and stuff, and you work with the consciousness people, the shamans out there, the witch doctors and stuff, they speak to these animals. So when they work on a different consciousness to what we're here in Babylon system, they will speak to the animal will say, look, I'm ready to go, it's okay, you can take my life. So they then...
The animal says you can take my life.
Yeah, you can look at research this.
Why would they want their life to be taken?
Because they're going to die anyway.
You're going to die anyway. Is it okay for someone to chop your head off?
If that's the case, if I speak to that person and say I'm ready to go, which is what? Euthanasia?
That's consensual.
Is that not euthanasia? Consensual, exactly.
I'm not talking about make-believe where an animal somehow non-verbally says, kill me now.
It's not make-believe. This is
why
you
would an
not
animal...
understanding
No, but
consciousness.
why? Tell me why the animal would just want to die.
Because it's going to die.
You're going to die.
Exactly.
So you're
We're
okay.
all
If
going
I
to
came up
die.
right now,
Yeah.
you didn't tell me. I just said non-verbally. You told
Yeah, but
me.
this is different. I'm not talking about
What's
verbally
different?
or non-verbally.
What's different?
What's different is...
Why is it okay for the animal to have their head chopped off for no good reason, but for you not?
But if the consciousness... If I'm dying and I feel like it's time to go, then fine, come and chop my head off.
See, this is the disagreement we're having.
This is
because what you're saying is, you're saying that people are non-verbally speaking to animals, and the animals are saying
and
yes.
I'm saying humans on this planet have gifts and abilities within them.
Hold on.
Go on.
You're saying, I just want to clarify,
Yeah, of
you're
course.
saying non-verbally they're saying it's okay for you to take my milk and chop my head off so you can eat me.
Yeah. In places around this world, that's perfectly viable. Hence why we said ahimsa.
Knowing we don't have to eat animals at all.
In India, this happens. In Brazil, this happens. In the jungle, in Africa. If you do your research on what I'm saying, you will see and understand what I'm talking about. And this is going into more, rather than the scientific 3D level, it's a metaphysical 5D level where we're understanding consciousness and frequency and vibration, and we're going on to a whole different level. Because this is what humans are being. Humans are evolving. And as we evolve, we understand that we're all one with everything. When we understand we're one with everything, we don't want to harm.
Do you think you can be
these
one
things.
with everything without consuming animal products?
Yeah, of course.
So what's stopping you from just doing that individually?
I do my best. I do as much as I can.
Do you think doing your best is okay considering what those animals have to go through?
Yeah. Why not? Why is that? Where? If I can feel I'm doing good enough, if I'm good enough...
But do you think it's good enough for them when they're in the slaughterhouse?
When they're in the slaughterhouse?
Yes.
No, of course not.
No.
Of course not.
So what's stopping you from just being vegan from now on?
Because
100% knowing what those animals go through.
Because there's conundrums that happen in life, which I explained with the burger situation. This was a situation that happened to me. And
this doesn't count. I will tell you why this doesn't count.
Why?
Because it was an accident, right?
Yeah,
If you're
exactly.
actively being a vegan and someone else makes a mistake, whether you eat or not, it doesn't really make a difference because it's already happened,
But
right?
I actively do my best in my life to go for vegan as much as I can. Wherever I can, I will always go for the vegan options. At home, the food that I eat, I have vegan
great.
milks.
That's awesome.
Everything that I do is veer to that. I don't eat any flesh. I'm not a pescatarian. I'm majority vegan. There's a veggie that comes in because you can't be a vegan if you're consuming eggs, dairy, or even honey.
Sure.
So,
Knowing that the egg industry and the dairy industry is no different to the meat industry,
yeah.
what's stopping you from just being against that too?
Because I've seen there's the flip side of it with ahimsa milk and stuff. I do my best. Like I say, I will.
But it's so easy to be vegan.
But then there's sometimes if you're given a coffee, and the coffee's got a splash of milk. Oh, sorry,
Bro,
mate.
I've been vegan for 6 years, and that's
Yeah.
only happened a handful of times when they make a mistake, and you go back and just say, "Mate, can you just swap this for it? Because I'm against this.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to be a part of this. I just wanted soy milk. You made a mistake. Can you please fix it?"
Yeah, you can. Of course.
And obviously, these are the few times where it's an accident. It's not going to make a difference to the animal. But I think in those scenarios, it's actually more powerful to stand up for the victim
But it's different if you're going to
than being complacent and just consuming and being okay with it.
Of course, but if you're going to more of a vegan little ethical restaurant, or like more of an ethical organic restaurant, homemade, not these big we're in front of Oaxaca right now. That's different. They're going to have lots of stuff. They have a budget for waste. But certain places they don't have these budgets, and it's not fair to allow them to waste. Because then we look at the human and the consciousness and stuff. And I agree with what you're saying. I would always go for the vegan stuff anyway.
But when would you not? That's the question. When would you actively choose to not be a vegan? Because you're talking about accidental stuff right now.
Yeah.
I don't care about accidental stuff, what someone else does.
But
when would you
Yeah.
choose the non-vegan option on purpose?
When there isn't any vegan options. And
When is there not a vegan option?
there's a few places. I've been to Spain, for instance. You go to
I
Spain,
was just there the other day.
yeah,
And we loved it.
yeah,
Vegan
and
food is
there are
great.
vegan places, 100%.
Whole
But there are
foods. You already
places-
talked about this, man. Whole foods everywhere.
there's-
That's the most fundamental foods there are.
Yeah,
they're
but
everywhere.
they're not
Fruits,
everywhere in
vegetables,
Spain.
whole grains. Yes, they are.
They're not.
Why? When are they? When is there no fruits,
So if you go
vegetables,
to a
whole
restaurant,
grains?
if you go to a restaurant, yeah,
What restaurant did you go to that didn't have a vegan option?
in Spain, I can't remember what it was called now.
And if
But
you did
I
go
went
to
to
if you
these
did go to a
places.
restaurant without a vegan option, what stopped
was
you
it?
from just going down the road and going to the vegan restaurant, knowing what these animals have to go through?
By going to the vegan restaurant, because there wasn't a vegan restaurants available. Everywhere was just chips or salad. So what else am I going to eat? Liver.
So what did
Chips
you
or
eat?
Salad. What did I end up eating? I had a pizza.
What was on the pizza?
Cheese, which is obviously an animal product. And
And would you choose the plant-based milk?
yeah, always,
Yeah,
every
yeah.
time, 100%.
Okay. Every time. Okay.
Yeah, every time. And at that time, that was
A product
What I
that's no
had.
different to the meat industry.
that was that's before I went into more veganism. I was vegetarian. Like I said, I was vegetarian. I transitioned to vegan, but there was no vegan
And
options.
it's funny
at
you
the
say
time.
this because just the other week we were in Italy and the only option we had was pizza. It was literally the same thing. Do you know what we ordered? Knowing what those dairy cows go through, we
Yeah.
chose to say get rid of the cheese and we'll just have a marinara pizza, the original pizza, tomato sauce on pizza, and it tasted great.
So what did that do for your body? Did you get your nutrients? Did
In
you
other
get your-
meals
did
I
you get
did.
your- did you
In
get
other
your
meals I
protein?
did. Because in that scenario, we only had access to that restaurant. We go to the grocery store and we get actual food after that too. We get fruits, vegetables, whole grains. It's everywhere,
I
man.
like that ethos.
Yeah, man,
I,
and
do,
like-
I really do like that ethos. I'm not going to lie. I really do like that ethos.
So what's stopping you from just saying, even if you're in that situation at a restaurant, what's stopping you from just saying, can you please get rid of the cheese because I don't want to... You don't even have to say this, but you personally, knowing what happens to those cows, I don't want to
But
fund
I'll
that.
check in. I'll check in with my consciousness. I'll check in with spirits, the ancestors. I'll check in with my intuition.
Check in with what
Is
those
this
animals
right?
go through.
I do check in with what animals go through.
Does that justify just not saying, hey, I just don't want the cheese. Can you just have a tomato and pizza?
Of course,
And vegetables.
yeah.
Every restaurant has vegetables.
And I agree with everything you're saying with veganism, of course. But what you don't see the other side of the flip thing, which I'm trying to say to you, that these animals have consciousnesses. So the whole
I agree
thing
with
about milk, the whole thing. Maybe one day I suggest
agree
you,
that the
you
conscience,
talk
that's
to
why I think it's
you
wrong.
talk to the animals. That will be the next level from being
Even
a
if
vegan.
I talk to them, it doesn't mean I'm going to take
You'll
their milk
learn a whole
away.
different way. Why?
No, but even if I spoke to them, it doesn't mean, okay,
So
I'm
what
speaking to
if
you.
this-
Can
what
I
if
have
this
your
animal-
milk?
What if this animal said you can have my milk? Would that change your mindset?
I don't care. I don't need their
Why?
milk. I don't want to take it from them.
Then that's your choice. That's a
Okay,
that's a
but
choice.
The reason I'm
But if
saying this is
animal said
hypothetical
this to
because
you,
no
it's
animal
not
is saying
hypothetical.
no animal
This
is saying take
exists.
my milk.
They are. I'm telling you. Why do you think this philosophy from thousands of years ago comes from the Vedas? The
Why?
Vedas is one of the
Okay,
most-
well, then I
the
will ask
oldest-
you one more
one of
thing.
the
I'll ask you
oldest
one more thing.
So-called
then.
religions, which isn't a religion, it's a way of life. Sanatan Dharma, for instance.
Can I ask you one more question before
Yeah.
we finish? Why would the cow want you to drink their milk?
Why would they? Because it's going to help nourish you.
Knowing we can get nourishment elsewhere, why would they want us to drink our milk?
What if you can't get nourishment elsewhere?
Can you get nourishment elsewhere?
In certain situations you can, but have you been to India, for instance? Have you seen some
There
of
are
the
many
places?
vegans in India.
Yeah, there are many
It's the-
vegans.
probably
of
they
course.
probably have the biggest vegan
Of course,
population.
but they have probably the biggest vegetarian and dairy stuff going
Yes,
on
because
there. They have
they're
fresh
okay
dairy.
with abusing animals, whether they know it or not.
Yeah, but not all of them. Over there, there's less of the industrial stuff that
It's
they get.
very industrial now.
It's now, yeah, but there's less.
But even if it wasn't, even if it
way less
wasn't,
than this country.
Yeah.
There's way less than this country.
Knowing that you don't have to.
But if you can, what's the problem?
What do you mean if you can?
If you can, if this consciousness of the animal is,
They're
giving
always
you the
going to be.
rights.
They're exploited. They're enslaved. You're seeing them as a commodity, as a product. They're not. If you can leave them alone and choose something else, I think you should do that.
Of course,
and
yeah,
we can finish it.
Yeah,
there.
we can finish it there. Yeah, perfect.
Thank you so much
Thank
for the
you so much.
conversation. I love those types of conversations.
Yeah.
I just hope that knowing that if you're just going to a grocery store, you're going anywhere, any restaurant, if you live in England, it's so easy. You
Yeah.
can just choose the vegan option. And you said you do.
Yeah,
you said
I
you
do,
always
yeah, I
choose
do.
the vegan
I
option.
always go for the vegan
but
option.
as you said, there's also times where you will actively choose the option that involves animal abuse, exploitation, enslavement.
Yeah.
Whether it's eggs or dairy, because you don't eat meat. Eggs or dairy, same thing, same as the meat industry.
Yeah.
We'll just leave it there. Anyway,
we'll leave it there,
thank
yeah.
you so much,
No
man.
worries. Anytime.
Have a great day.
You too.
And it was a good conversation.